In this episode, we get very close to wrapping up the 5-look swap for Project Low Fairmont in the front, but of course, we run into a snag and a half. Welcome to the channel. My name's Grant Tommy. This is Straight Six Fan. I like to focus on budget-minded, relatable, creative builds, a little something I like to call offbeat hot rodding, helping you build your hot rod and build your confidence. But in today's episode, we are going to attempt to wrap up the 5-look swap for the front of Project Low Fairmont. But before we do that, I kind of did want to bring you up to speed on not only some work, but some line of thinking. So where we left off 2 weeks ago, of course this is when we tore down everything in the front, I mentioned how I was going to just do a straight one-for-one swap of the mounted rotor assembly on the spindle that I purchased. However, when you tried to do that, you couldn't clear the ball joint with the rotor on the spindle. The spindle would catch on the lower control arm, so it was just frankly impossible. Also, when I reached out to the former owner of those spindles, he mentioned how the car that it came off of had over 200,000 miles on it, and how he'd recommend using something with less miles, which of course my car would have since we're still under 70,000 original miles. But the downside to that is on the driver's side, I just wailed on it way too much with a sledgehammer that I did nick it in some places and damaged the spindle. So I bought some emery cloth and for the most part got rid of all of that damage. I also damaged the threads on the original spindle. So then I bought a thread file. However, the thread file I bought was too small of a diameter. I kind of had to take it apart and use the parts and pieces to repair the threads. But anyway, we have the original spindle back on the car, which means I'm able to run the splash shields. If you've made it through all that, we're going to get to work here. I'm going to show you some action shots. However, I did want to also bring up to speed. Yesterday, Saturday, I finished the driver's side as is, and if you stick around to the end, you will see what clearance issue I'm now running into. But nonetheless, I wrapped up last night by getting me in a position for today's episode by reinstalling the spindle to the strut. If you missed that teardown episode 2 weeks ago, you know that I ended up breaking down and buying a new tie rod in for this side because the boot has a tear in it. But before I can remove the old one, I'm I'm going to reinstall it to help me with backing off the nut, because it's sort of a double nut assembly. This is sort of a backing nut that you back up to the tie rod. So this is going to help me be able to break this loose better, so let me do that. So after we've removed it from the spindle, the simple way to do this now is to count how many full turns it takes to back this off, letting 12 o'clock of the tie rod be in your counting point. So we will do that, and that kind of gives us an idea of how many times we gotta put the new one on. So 1, 2, 23, 24, 25. 25, and we were sort of spun down here to start it. Alright, so here's the problem, is the old versus the new. Two different sizes. So that's fantastic. Okay, so what I've done is I've spun this back on in a similar way, 25 turns, to the same location as the stock one, but since the new one is longer than the old one, I did measure that to be about 1 1/16 inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from this stock location back 1 1/16, and back this off to that point. And then I'm going to spin this on the rest of the way and hope that's going to do the magic trick. Obviously, still going to need to take it to an alignment shop regardless. So hopefully this will do just fine for the time being, before I can take it to an alignment shop. Okay, so we'll see how many full turns we can get now to bottom this out on that. And I did double check on O'Reilly's website. This is the same part number that came up when I searched for it myself, so I mean, it is what it is. With a fresh set of gloves on, we begin to address removing the dust cap on the Ranger rotor. So we just kind of evenly work our way around, prying it off. I'm going to set her aside. After the dust cap, the cotter pin, and from here, just gently remove this retaining clip. Nut. I went ahead and I'm using channel locks. The last one, the driver's side, of course I didn't have any issues with popping off, but it kind of feels like we're gonna have issues here today. One thing different between his setup and mine is the style of this washer on the spindle is just ever so slightly different. Mine has kind of more of a tapered shape to it. So make sure so I'm gonna reuse this on the Fairmont spindle because it works. So with that, we can slowly start to lift caliper off of the spindle. So while on the passenger side, I was able to just pull the rotor off and maintain the rear bearing and the seal in there. This one did not want to come out that way. So the seal and the bearing still in the spindle, and it seems to be like as if there's just so much friction that I cannot separate the bearing off of the back of the spindle. So it looks like what I'm going to do is I pulled out one of the stock Fairmont bearings, so I'm going to clean this out and repack this with grease, and we will just repack the bearings on this side. Now I know the inside diameter of the Fairmont bearing works on the Fairmont spindle. I was a little worried about the outside diameter, so I did double check it with my caliper, and the Ranger, you know, what would go in the Ranger disc does match the this bearing, so we know we can use this. I had to actually remove this bearing with a crowbar. That's how bad it was sort of just seized on the spindle, and I'm going to show you why the guy I bought the spindles from recommended I use my stock spindles, and that is because, as you can see, these are worn really bad, and he actually had a machinist friend score on some of these marks. I don't know if you can see those, but that may be partially why the bearing grabbed a hold of this probably and would not come off. I do, however, still need to get this seal off. I'm going to reuse the seal. In the meantime, I've actually called or made an online order to O'Reilly's. I just went ahead and got new inner and outer bearings. Even though my Fairmont has 70-some thousand miles on it, I just figured I'm here, why not do new? And then this is the outer seal, and it just has this little flat spot in it that I was like, you know what, just buy new. And I did, and it's not going to ping the budget because between $10 coupon I have at O'Reilly's as well as credit card cash back, it's basically, it's nothing. I also need to take my oil and drop it off at O'Reilly's anyway. I changed the oil in my truck yesterday, so won't be a lost trip, as well as I ran out gloves, so if I'm going to be packing bearings full of grease, I need new clean gloves as well. So anyway, I'm going to go run to O'Reilly's and hopefully get back. We can start packing the front bearings and getting that rotor. Alright, so I made that trip to O'Reilly's and did pick up a new set of bearings that I ordered online. So that worked out great. I dropped off my oil, picked up some new gloves, and I dropped off my rotor to get resurfaced because I noticed on the back there was an imperfection, a little divot in the rotor, so I figured why the heck not, it's all apart, go do the right thing. So we're going to get new bearings and a new rotor. However, of course I couldn't get that all done in one trip because this took a good 30 to 45 minutes to get it turned. So I had to go back and pick it up. It is now probably 15-20 past 4, so I kind of know myself too well. I want to get this done, but I'm afraid I'm going to rush the job, even though it's pretty simple. So I figure I'm going to hold off and just do that probably, hopefully, tomorrow night, Monday night. And so I guess with that, let's just close this episode out. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, I did get the driver's side done last night, and that there was a fitment issue. And basically what that fitment issue is, the tires, because of the wheel offset, rub on the strut. So from what I could tell, kind of looking at it last night, I think I need a 1-inch spacer to make the Crown Vic wheels work up front. So 1 inch, you know, of course the Charger wheels probably would have worked great up front, but not out back. but the Crown Vic wheels work great out back, not up front. Nonetheless, I've got I think some options for trying to test fit some 1-inch spacers before I end up pulling the trigger on those. But that, my friends, is what this episode ends up being about. So, sorry, I wish I could have more business shots for you, but speaking of business, I'm trying to run one by selling t-shirts in my Spreadshirt store, and I think today is the last day, I believe. 22nd is today, the 22nd, so if you're watching this as soon as it uploads, use promo code SHIP4ME and get free shipping on either a straight 6-fan Pistons tee or a 30/60s 198 tee. Car Guy and 6-fan show is on my channel this week. We are now just full bore into season 2.1. StreamYard's bailing us out, so look for that Thursday, 7 p.m. Central. Of course, that is with Old Car Auto Guy. Let's put a little card up here for him. If you don't know what his channel is, go check his channel out. Like, comment, or share this episode. Or if you made it all the way through and you got some value out of this, why don't you think about subscribing? I don't care which one you do, as long as you do one, it helps out my channel. That'll do it for this episode. Until next time, peace out.